There has been a cataclysmic change, a geopolitical earthquake in Bangladesh. Overnight, it seems to have transformed the situation. But the events were building up to this denouement. It's not happened, as a sudden flash bang. It was building up to this for quite some time. And it would be very useful to now calmly sit back and analyze what precisely has happened and why. Who done it is part of this analysis. Let me rewind a little. I was fortunate enough to take part in the war for the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971. As we all know, 71, the elections had been held in Bangladesh after a long time. General Yahya Khan was the dictator in Pakistan. He held the elections. He was very sure there would be a fractured outcome and he would play the parties and the Pakistani army would remain the prima donna behind the scene. But when the election outcome was announced, there was a shock in Pakistan. The Awami League had swept more than 2/3 of the majority. Out of 167 seats, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's Awami League had won 165. By all means, he should have now been the Prime Minister of Pakistan, the then united Pakistan. Yahya Khan and Bhutto decided that over their dead bodies would a Bengali ever be made the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Yahya Khan was egged on by Bhutto to nip the evil as they felt in the bud, and Yahya Khan initially played for time, pretended to negotiate. Admiral Ehsan was the governor. He was a decent guy, and he told the rulers the military rulers in West Pakistan that the people had turned against them and we should be very careful with what we do now. What Yahya did was he sent in Lieutenant General Tika Khan, the butcher of Bangladesh and later in Balochistan. And he started Operation Searchlight, a pogrom to slaughter all the intellectuals in Dhaka universities, all the professors, students whom he felt were fueling this anti-West Pakistan sentiment. And there was a vicious crackdown, the like of which has not been seen in recent history. 1 million Bangladeshi women were raped. 3 million Bangladeshis were killed. And 10 million Bangladeshis, most of them Hindus, were just pushed out. Ethnic cleansing was done and they were pushed out into India. India had just turned the corner by terms of the Green Revolution. We had become self-sufficient in agriculture. Otherwise, we were on ship-to-mouth existence of PL 480 from the United States. Food grains were coming. Now we had gained autarky, if I may say so, or self-sufficiency in food grains. But yet this put an intolerable strain on our economy and one that India could not bear indefinitely. So to cut a long story short, there was a searing revolt in East Pakistan led by the East Bengal Rifles, the East Pakistan Rifles, etc., the regiment, East Bengal Regiment and East Pakistan Rifles, the military and paramilitary units of Bangladesh that was then part of the Pakistan Army, they revolted. And then, enraged people who had seen their women being raped, their village being destroyed, burnt, in that horrific genocide, that ethnic cleansing campaign, they rose up in revolt. The Mukti Bahini fought, Pakistan for 8 to 9 months. Single-handedly, they went for Pakistan. And when we tried to request Pakistan to take back the refugees, they would not budge. In Washington, we had President Richard Malhouse Nixon and his advisor, Henry Kissinger. They decided to lean towards Pakistan, to tilt towards Pakistan and help them, because unbeknownst to the rest of the world, at that time, the United States was making an outreach to communist China with Pakistan as the go-between. See the cast of characters: Pakistan, China, United States, trying to coalesce into an anti-India kind of a coalition. So Pakistan was intransigent, refused to take back a single refugee, and they felt they had sorted out that problem by their vicious crackdown, by their bloody crackdown, which Arthur Blood, who was the US Consul General in Dhaka, he sent messages that this is a disaster and the United States should delink itself from this murderous genocidal regime, but he was posted out for his pains from the Dhaka consulate. And Henry Kissinger shut this project down of a voice of sanity and reason. The simple fact is that on the 3rd of December, it was Pakistan that initiated hostilities. Pakistan bombed 6 Indian airfields in the west and also tried to bomb in the east. The next day, the Indian armed forces were fully prepared, ready for this contingency, and they struck across the border in Bangladesh in 13 days. 13 days, there was a brilliant blitzkrieg. Indian forces rushed 550 kilometers deep inside eastern Pakistan, reached the capital city of Dhaka, ensured a regime change, and the Indian tricolor proudly fluttered there along with the flag of Bangladesh, a new country on the map of this earth. 93,000 Pakistani prisoners surrendered in what was the biggest mass surrender in the world after the Second World War. Those were heady days indeed. And then the Mukti Jodhas, they took terrible revenge from the Pakistani prisoners who had carried out a lot of these massacres, but then the Indian army stepped in to stop the bloodletting, and we transported rapidly those prisoners out. General Niazi had surrendered to General Jagjit Singh Arora. It was the finest chapter in India's military history, in fact our civilizational history. People say that you can't change your neighbors. Well, the Indian armed forces changed the borders of South Asia. A new nation state, as I said, was created with the force of arms. Here now we found a strange new tension that was inbuilt into the fabric of the new nation state of Bangladesh. The Pakistanis had been thrown out by a combination of the Mukti Bahini acting in close concert with the Indian armed forces, providing them intelligence, providing them logistical support, intelligence support, and which facilitated the Indian blitzkrieg in Bangladesh. They had fought the war, they had seen the Pakistani army out of their country and liberated their land. They were a set of collaborators. They were the Razakars, who had been locally raised with the help of the Jamaat-e-Islami to aid the Pakistani army in its vicious genocidal crackdown. They were the ones who were killing their own people, supplying women to the Pakistani army officers and the Jawans alike, and had wrought mayhem in East Pakistan. There were quite obviously a lot of retaliation against them, but they remained a force to reckon with in the new nation of Bangladesh, the Jamaat-e-Islami, the people who had stoutly resisted the emergence of a new nation state, and on the basis of the relation of the Kalma Pakistan se rishta kya, la ilaha illallah kind of a slogan. They had supported the Pakistan army and fought against the liberation of Bangladesh. It was now a fait accompli. A whole lot of Bangladeshi army officers were then in West Pakistan serving with the Pakistani army in the Western theatre. They were repatriated 4 years later, and they became another influence group in Bangladesh. Another group in Bangladesh, which normally they were pro-Pakistani, many of them, and they aligned with the Jamaat-e-Islami elements, the jihadi Islamist elements in Bangladesh. And in 1974, trouble started brewing in Bangladesh. 1975, déjà vu. Indian intelligence got to know that a major vicious coup was being planned to kill Mujibur Rahman and his entire family, wipe them out. Because the Americans were not happy, the Chinese were not happy, and Pakistan, of course, was smarting with humiliation. With what has happened just recently in August, there was an air of déjà vu. The Indian intelligence warned Mujibur Rahman of what was coming, and a helicopter of the Aviation Research Center was sent in to rescue, to get him out, to fly Mujibur Rahman out of the country in the face of this impending coup. But Mujibur Rahman unfortunately refused to listen. He would not believe, he could not believe that his own people, whom he had led to freedom, would kind of had such a plot against him or would try to harm him and his family. He paid a tragic price for his faith in his own people. He was brutally slaughtered, murdered in cold blood, he and his entire family. Only 2 girls escaped from that family. One was Hasina Wajid, and these girls, his daughters, escaped because they were not inside Bangladesh then. Otherwise, they would have been, the entire family would have been finished. And then we see chaos unleashed in Bangladesh. A series of coups and counter coups and all that. And then, of course, we had General Ziaur Rahman, who finally, had been in West Pakistan when all this happened. He took charge in Bangladesh. He staged a coup and he was the ruler for a long period of time. He was followed by General Muhammad Ershad, coup and counter coup, etc. And then there was again yet another changeover. So it is only by somewhere around 2005 that the Mukti Jodhas, the original liberators of Bangladesh, the more secular, more enlightened set of people who fought for the freedom of Bangladesh, that they were able to rally themselves, and a counter coup was staged, and Sheikh and Hasina Wajid was back in power there, right? The BNP had also then come in after the assassination of Ziaur Rahman. His Begum Khalida Zia had formed the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, BNP, and with the help of the Jamaat-e-Islami, they had ruled for a fair amount of time. And then Hasina Wajid went back into Bangladesh, took great courage to re-enter, and the Awami League then, with the help of the Mukti Jodhas, well, they came to the fore again, and they were back in power. So there has been this constant polarization between the pro-Pakistan Jamaat-e-Islami, Islamic jihadist elements, and the Mukti Bahini, which had led the freedom struggle and whose political wing, of course, was the Awami League. Constant polarization and tension, and whatever we see playing out in Bangladesh is the sequential rise and fall, the maximization of the power of either the jihadist, the Jamaat-e-Islami, led by the Jamaat-e-Islami, or the pro-freedom forces of the Mukti Bahini Awami League. A constant jostling for power has been taking place. What we see now is the latest chapter in this bitter contestation that we have been ongoing in Bangladesh. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's daughter Hasina Wajed has now been in power. She had been in power for 3 terms, and she was about to go for the 4th election. The BNP had boycotted these elections. They had refused to take part. Nevertheless, these elections were held, and a canard was spread that these had been unfair elections, that if the opposition boycotts, it can't be forced to contest the elections. So the simple fact is that she had come into power for an unprecedented 4th term, and there was quite obviously an element of anti-incumbency that was working against her. They were the 3 hostile powers of China, Pakistan and the United States, which were now working to try and bring about a regime change in Bangladesh, and I shall analyze the actions of each of these state actors a little ahead. But to go in a sequential narrative, there was a reservation of 30% for the children of the Mukti Jodhas, of the freedom fighters, which extended to their children and to their grandchildren. Now things had been going very fine. Sheikh Hasina Wajed had brought about almost a turnaround in Bangladesh's economic situation. Bangladesh was almost something like an Asian tiger emerging. In many aspects, her economy was doing better, much better than that of destitute West Pakistan, 10 times better than the Pakistani economy. She was thriving, and in many socio-economic matrices, Bangladesh was higher than India. India, the 5th largest economy in the world, Bangladesh was doing better in many, performing better in many socio-economic matrices than even India. Far better than their erstwhile colonizers of West Pakistan. Unfortunately, during the COVID period, Bangladesh's main export industry of garments got hit very badly. Quite obviously, those factories had to be shut down. A lot of the export earnings of Pakistan went down, and unfortunately that was followed by the Russia-Ukraine war which sent the prices of oil spiraling and gave a further hit to the Bangladeshi economy. As such, inflation was on the rise. As such, unemployment was on the rise. And in that context, the 30% reservation for the children and grandchildren of the Mukti Jodhas became a fierce point of contestation. It must be understood that Hasina Wajed was not blind to this. She herself had removed this quota. She had given orders for the removal of this quota when the matter was taken to the Dhaka High Court, and that ruled in favor of the quotas, and the quotas of 30% were restored. And this was taken as the flashpoint, the excuse to orchestrate a Maidan type coup against Hasina Wajed. Arab Spring, if you may say so, in South Asian Spring was unleashed, a green revolution was unleashed. I am sure this term will go into historical lexicon shortly. Now, when this problem started spiraling out of control, the Supreme Court of Bangladesh intervened, and on its own they reduced the quota of the Mukti Jodhas from 30% to 5%. So that should have taken the sting out of this entire orchestrated student movement. But it did not. To the contrary, the violent agitation just snowballed, turned into an avalanche on the streets. And the ostensible excuse was that excessive force had been used to suppress the student protests. some 300-400 students had been killed, and this led to an orchestrated furor. And now the straight action was the whole focus shifted to a so-called stolen election, and that Hasina Wajed just had to go. We all know what happened on the 5th of August. She was given a démarche by the Bangladesh army, which felt that things were absolutely out of control. They could not help it any longer. Even the Indian, establishment had become aware of what is cooking. After all, India has a fairly good eyes and ears operating in Bangladesh, and we were aware that a coup was happening. It is now being speculated in the media that the Indian High Commissioner had met Hasina Wajed, and because the situation was turning grim, there were fears for her safety, and she was then told to resign. She wanted to give a last speech. The Bangladesh army told her to resign. She wanted to give a last speech before she left Bangladesh, but there was no time. In 45 minutes she was packed up and she was sent to taken to an airfield where a helicopter was waiting for her, and that Mi-8 helicopter flew her out to Agartala. The moment she crossed the Agartala border, Indian Rafales escorted that helicopter to our base in Agartala, and from there a C-130 aircraft then brought her to New Delhi, where she was met by the National Security Advisor of India. Fortunately, the 1975 massacre had been averted because of the awareness of the Indians, about the situational awareness of the Indians, and the cooperation of the Bangladesh armed forces. We all know how the army chief General Wakr, he went on to television, and along with the Navy and the Air Chief, to show that the three services were on board, and he announced that they were not with Hasina Wajed, but with the people of Bangladesh, that the police had been ordered to stop all action against the rioters, and that interim government would be sworn in the next 48 hours. Hectic consultations were held with the president along with the student union leaders, as also the other leaders of the BNP and the Jamaat-e-Islami. The Awami League was kept out of these consultations, and very shortly thereafter it emerged that Yunus, the poster boy of the United States democratic establishment, who had gotten the Nobel Prize and who was the head of the Grameen Bank movement for microfinance, and he was very popular in the country, even more popular outside, especially in the United States, he was brought in. What followed, therefore, was even more horrifying. The crowds went berserk. Awami League, Aprata chicks, leaders, etc., they were murdered. Their corpses were hung from the bridges, from the electrical wires. Hindu houses were attacked, temples were attacked, businesses were attacked. There was chaos in the streets, unleashed in the streets of Bangladesh. The Prime Minister's residence was looted. People stole the furniture, people stole her saris and blouses. I mean, it was a pathetic thing to watch. But the worst was that these jihadi crowds, not so much the students, but the Jamaat-e-Islami Aprata chicks, were seen trying to smash down the gigantic statue of Mujibur Rahman. They went at it with hammer and tongs, but the hammers could do very little to that metallic statue. So therefore, thereafter we found a déjà vu, repeat of what had happened in Baghdad when the United States had overthrown Saddam Hussein. The statue of Bangabandhu, the man who had liberated Bangladesh, was toppled down using cranes. A total repeat of what the Americans had done to destroy the legacy of Saddam Hussein, to show the world that Saddam was history. So here was an attempt to show that the liberation of Bangladesh was history. I mean, what does that mean? Are the people of Bangladesh keen to join Pakistan, West Pakistan? A country, destitute country on the brink of economic collapse and meltdown, where the people can't get 2 square meals a day, where the electricity bills are 60,000 a month for people who earn 40,000 rupees a month. There is chaos and mayhem ongoing in Pakistan. And here is Pakistan trying to impose its ideology, impose its failed jihadi state matrices onto a Bangladesh which was become far more prosperous than its original colonizers. But that cannot be. What is happening in Bangladesh is an aberration. And Khan Yunus Khan, I mean, he has gone on record to say that India will have to choose between Begum Hasina Wajid and Bangladesh. So for fait accompli is that there has been a regime change in Bangladesh, and India now has no option but to adjust, and therefore there were voices that India should not to be able to keep bridges open with the new Bangladeshi dispensation. India should not give refuge to Hasina Wajid. There are pros and cons. Hasina Wajid was a very, very sincere friend of India. She had safeguarded Indian interests in Bangladesh. She had taken cudgels on behalf of India with China and the United States. And I shall cover these aspects a little more later. She had stuck her neck out to see that Indian interests were not compromised in Bangladesh. She had finished all those terrorist training camps which the ISI had established, insurgent training camps which had been established in Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar, etc., and how the Assamese rebels had been kept in Dhaka itself by the previous regimes. She had closed that jihad factory totally, and she had cracked down on the Jihad-e-Islami. She had the murderers of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman brought to trial and hung, you see. So she had gone out of the way, stuck her neck out to be supportive or be sensitive to Indian security interests. So can we disown her, dump her when there is a problem? Are we just fair weather friends? That is one way of looking at it. The second is, well, we have to now go beyond that phase and deal with the situation as it is. So in that, it may not be helpful for her to be in India for the time being, but the British refused to take her. And I'll tell you the reasons why. The Americans refused to take her. She wanted to go either to United Kingdom, where a lot of her family is, or to the United States, where a lot of her family is, or to Finland, where some of her family members are. But so far, no country under American pressure or influence, or I don't know what, has been willing to give her asylum. So we'll have to wait and watch how it goes. For the time being, she is in India. There is still chaos in Bangladesh. The police has gone on strike because the police stations are being attacked, the police personnel are being attacked, killed, hung. There is all breakdown of law and order. There is complete anarchy, and Muhammad Yunus, his first appeal has been to restore calm, to see that the minorities are not attacked, because that can aggravate the situation. So this is what has happened in a nutshell. Now let's get behind the scenes and work on who done it, why and how. So, like I said, there are three major players in this game, and the masterminds are in the United States and in China. The assassin are in the Pakistani ISI, which has been the cat's paw, which has acted as the cat's paw for both the United States and China. Now, let us examine their roles one by one. Let us first address this cat's paw, the actual hatchet men who have done the job, who are now crowing that they have reversed the results of the Bangladesh war. They have reversed the freedom of Bangladesh. They have rewinded that entire chapter of history. I think they need to cool down a bit, but the fact is the Pakistanis have played a very, very nefarious role. Pakistan's army chief had gone to the United States, Asim Munir had gone to the United States, and there, as part of his itinerary, he had met Victoria Nuland. Who is Victoria Nuland? The American State Department official, gung ho, who was responsible, who got the Maidan coup staged in the Ukraine, deposed Yanukovych, the elected president of Ukraine, staged the entire coup against Russia. The target was Russia. Of course, the coup was staged in Ukraine, but the target was Russia. She has been behind a whole lot of other colored revolutions, a nefarious role, and wherever she goes, trouble follows. She had visited Bangladesh. Why did she have to meet General Asim Munir? That sort of defied reason at that time. Now it is amply clear why she had met Asim Munir. The game was being played. Let me give you some of the behind the scenes action. 2016, the ISI establishes contact with Begum Zia's son, Tariq, in London. Has a long powwow with him, and they start this machinations of this regime change game going in Bangladesh. Next year, they again meet Tariq, Begum Khalida Zia's son, in Saudi Arabia. Now they start reactivating their cohorts in the Jamaat-e-Islami. The Jamaat-e-Islami is a state within a state in not just Bangladesh, also in Pakistan. In Bangladesh, it is very rich. It has a coffer of $1 billion. It has penetrated most institutions of state, the universities, etc. It has a very, very strong presence on the street. It has been behind the anti-Hindu pogroms that had happened before the 71 war, and occasionally whenever there is violence against the Hindu minority, this Christian minority, the Jamaat-e-Islami's hand is clearly imprimatur, is clearly seen behind the scenes. Now, this is the hatchet role played by Pakistan's ISI, which has acted as the cat's paw for America and for China. Now, what is America's role in this whole game? The Americans for some time have been chafing against the Hasina Wajid regime in Bangladesh. They have been claiming that the elections have been fraudulent, they have been unfair, and that she has lost her legitimacy, more or less. Hasina Wajid made a very, very interesting disclosure a few months back. She said somebody from a white country, quite obviously she was alluding to the United States, came and met her and said, look, the elections are forthcoming, the January this year's elections are forthcoming, and we will see to it that you have no problems, but you will have to cede the island of St. Martin, where we will develop a naval and an air base. It's a small island at the mouth of the Chittagong estuary, and they wanted to establish a naval base and an air base there to dominate the Bay of Bengal, very crucial area between Myanmar, Bangladesh, India, And we all know that China, with its Belt Road initiatives, had made solid inroads into Myanmar, where the Americans have created a lot of mayhem to curtail the Chinese influence. And the Chinese had taken over the Hangui port. So the Bay of Bengal is under serious contestation, and the Americans wanted to build a base there. There are also media reports that she stated that the Americans told her of a project to carve out a Christian state with the Kukis in Manipur, Mizoram, and also in neighboring Myanmar, and that if she helped in this project, American CIA project, she would have a smooth ride for the next election. She staunchly refused, and she said, I would rather not be the Prime Minister than compromise on the sovereignty of Bangladesh. So this was the casus belli for the United States to egg on the ISI and the Jihad-e-Islami and the BNP to stage a coup. And they then gave it that Maidan coup kind of a look, the anti-Saddam Hussein kind of a overthrow, regime change dramatics, with the toppling of the statue, just like the statue of Saddam Hussein had been toppled in Baghdad, to show that a whole history had come full circle. Don't forget that in 1971 war, the United States had sent the 7th Fleet into the Bay of Bengal to try and help out Pakistan, bail out Pakistan. It's another matter that the then Soviet Union had sent in its nuclear submarines, and they surfaced close to the 7th Fleet Armada, the nuclear carrier, aircraft carrier enterprise. And by the time it was too late, India had reached Dhaka. So that was an intervention, American intervention, that that couldn't happen. This intervention, what we are trying to be symbolically told, has apparently reversed all the gains that India made in the Bangladesh war. It may be too soon to celebrate. We will have to wait and watch how things unfold. The next major player is China. Don't forget that China has been demanding an extension of the Belt Road initiative. The Doklam problem should have given us an indication that the Chinese were trying to create land corridor linkages to Bangladesh. There's just that narrow Siliguri corridor which is there, which they were trying to threaten, and they wanted to have a land link between a Belt Road initiative extending into Bangladesh to the port of Chittagong. They wanted a deep sea port next to Chittagong, which Sheikh Hasina Wajed refused to give to China, and then she gave it to Japan to develop, because at least she knew then that the Chinese wouldn't use it as a Trojan horse, that the Chinese would not repeat a Hamban Tota onto Bangladesh, get them into a debt trap and take over the deep sea port just next to Chittagong. Chittagong is a shallow port, low draft. The Chinese wanted to build a huge container terminal next to Chittagong. Sheikh Hasina Wajed refused. The Chinese were very keen to take on the Teesta project. Sheikh Hasina Wajed declined. And when she went to Beijing recently, the Chinese hosts were very rude. It was a 5-day visit, and she came back in just 3 days. That is unprecedented in diplomatic niceties. This is just not done. But the Chinese were so rude to her, apparently, because she was not kowtowing, because she was refusing to give in to their demands, that the writing was more or less on the wall. In a huff, she left Beijing in just 3 days out of a 5-day visit. Chinese have been trying desperately to gain influence in Pakistan. They have deep pockets. They have sold to them submarines, military equipment at lower than manufacturing costs, lower than the cost of manufacture, which no other nation around in the periphery could compete. and supply those equipments to Bangladesh at those throwaway rates. The Chinese have made major inroads into the universities of Bangladesh, especially the Dhaka universities. They have sent students on exchange programs which are heard recently shouting pro-China slogans. Right? They have established contact with the Islamic Chhatra Sangh and a whole lot of the student organizations of the Jamaat-e-Islami and the BNP. They have made their inroads there. They have set the stage for this student revolution, so-called, which has been led by the students on the street. And it is the students who then later said, we will decide who will lead the interim government, not the armed forces. We created this revolution, we will choose. And they have chosen Muhammad Yunus, a darling of Hillary Clinton, a darling of the democratic establishment in Washington. So it is sad. On the one hand, the United States says it is a great friend of India. The Republicans have brought in a motion in the Senate that India should be given special status. It should be given the status of a non-NATO ally, that we should give it all the weapons it needs to fight China, though that is one part of the equation. And quite obviously that is where Indian and the United States interests overlap. But the democratic dispensation in Washington, led by Joe Biden, seems to be saying one thing and doing the exact opposite. The degree of hostility that their actions are displaying totally belies their honeyed words. Look at the GE 404, GE 414 jet engine deal. They have totally stalled that deal. India was crucially dependent on that deal to replace its aging MiG-21 fighter fleet. Its aging MiG-21 fighter fleet, and they were, we were desperately looking for this as a major breakthrough. The United States wants us to cut off all military technical ties with Russia. Wants us to cut off all military technical ties with Russia, tried and tested relationships, ditch the Russians. For what? For this kind of a stab in the back, for this kind of a single source reliance, where they are most prone to cut off the supply chain at a most crucial juncture. You want us to fight China, and how? By cutting off the GE 414 engine, transfer of technology. I don't know, that seems to be a chimera, a pipe dream up in the sky. The actions are so distressingly hostile, that you can forgive the Indians for being a bit confused. That is the real fact of life. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? The simple fact is, whichever dispensation comes into power in Bangladesh, right now it is Muhammad Yunus and his team. Muhammad Yunus has been making all sorts of statements that India will have to ditch Hasina Wajed to establish working relationships with a new dispensation in Bangladesh, etc. But the simple fact is, and he is cognizant of this, the first call that he has given is for restoration of normalcy in Bangladesh. With the Bangladesh police on strike, will they be able to do this? With the Bangladesh army wisely, I would say, deciding not to do a Tiananmen Square, not to do a Jallianwala Bagh, not to massacre their own people, they have totally taken themselves off the street. The scenes between the students and the armored personnel carriers are reminiscent of what happened in Beijing and the Tiananmen Square uprising, when the students were giving flowers to the Chinese tankmen. So we are seeing similar scenes of Bonhomme. They are trying to say we are with the people, of Bangladesh and not with the Hasina Wajid ancient regime, and they are refusing to take action. So, how will law and order be restored? As of now, there is still violence, anarchy on the streets. Bangladesh, a functional nation state, doing very well economically, very progressive, very much on the upward trajectory, has been reduced to a jihadi mess. Pakistan had treated it as a colony, had rapaciously looted its resources, kept it in pecuniary and poverty, taken its resources, and West Pakistan had fed off the fat of the land, and now West Pakistan is in turmoil, is in economic, nose dive, and yet that country is wanting to impose its brand of chaos on a nation that was a functional nation state. For the time being, it has been reduced to anarchy and ruin. But will Muhammad Yunus be able to restore the darling of the democratic dispensation in the United States? What will happen when there is a regime change in Washington, which could well happen? If Donald Trump takes over, the whole world is being taught how to conduct fair elections. I'm sorry, the simple fact that the rest of the world can also observe is the number of cases being filed against Donald Trump, legal cases, legal pressure, and then an assassination attempt at Donald Trump. So, I would say that electoral process is also not flawless before they point fingers at other democracies. Whatever it is, Bangladesh is headed for a period of turmoil. Bangladesh, the people of Bangladesh, unfortunately, who are doing so well, have to decide whether they want to choose jihadi anarchy and chaos, economic ruin over development and a secular polity. Thank you.